So good morning and welcome to all the attendees who are joining us for this Symbiosis Lit Fest 2020. It's virtual because of the circumstances that we are in, the pandemic, and I hope all of you are safe at home with your family and your friends. But it's a great opportunity for us to meet with people from across the world. So many can't travel to Pune, and therefore the virtual Lit Fest actually has an advantage. So welcome and thank you for deciding to spend your weekend with us. This Saturday and Sunday promises to be, I think, it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be interesting. I think many questions are going to be raised, many thoughts that we can take back and discuss with our family and friends over the dinner table, WhatsApp, which we've all fallen in love with ever since the pandemic has hit us. I'd like to give you a few instructions before we begin. We are waiting for the inaugural session. The inaugural session, of course, you know that Dr. Shashi Tharoor is the chief guest, and we are looking forward to a scintillating conversation with him. The minute you do take his name, I think everyone across the board knows that they're in for an interesting, intelligent, and stimulating time. Before we begin that, just one reminder. We've had an unprecedented response to this LitFest, and therefore some of you or your friends and family may not be able to join in on Zoom. There is a YouTube channel where this is being streamed live. Please do go there. And then later on between sessions, if you feel like taking a coffee break or something, please don't log off. Just minimize, mute, so that you can come back. It's very frustrating to come back and realize that someone else has taken your place and you've got to now watch it on YouTube. But we're here, we're ready. I can see Dr. Tharoor, and on a very personal note, Dr. Tharoor, you gave us a lot of mental and moral support when we started the liberal arts program. I still remember the first speech you gave at that workshop that Dr. Vidya and I and Dr. Soman did in Delhi. So every time I feel comforted by the fact that the liberal arts is doing well, I always give you a little thanks. So good morning and welcome to the Symbiosis Lit Fest 2020. I now invite Dr. Vidya Yerodekar, Pro-Chancellor, Symbiosis International University, to welcome all of you.
Thank you, Anita. Respected chief guest for the inaugural ceremony, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who all of us love most, and we're missing him at Symbiosis, and I'm so happy that he accepted our invitation. Our Chancellor, Dr. S.B. Muzumdar, sir, who's founded Symbiosis, our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Rajni Gupte, and all my colleagues and wonderful friends and students and all academia from all across India. I think the Symbiosis Lit Fest is really hit so well that, we have so much of participation both on Zoom as well as YouTube Live. And sir, we are extremely thankful to you for having accepted our invitation. You will remember that, we've released almost, no, I won't say all of those 20 books, but certainly many of your books have been released at Symbiosis. And the audience at Symbiosis and specifically in Pune city loves you and loves your words when you speak. And therefore, we are looking forward to this session. You know that Symbiosis was established by my father, Dr. Muzumdar sir, way back in 1971. And this is our golden jubilee year. And we were a little put off that, this pandemic has hit us right in our golden jubilee year when we had actually looked at wonderful celebrations all through the year. But then, as you know, Symbiosis always thinks innovatively, and we did think that way. And we said that, it's best to do something virtual so that we reach out to a much, much larger audience. It's not just our students and academia, but even our alumni from all across the globe who could join these virtual sessions. So we started with the Symbiosis Golden Jubilee Lecture Series, and we've been, I'm happy to inform you that every month we have two eminent scholars, speakers who speak at this Golden Jubilee Lecture Series. And as a part of this Symbiosis Golden Jubilee celebrations is this Symbiosis Lit Festival. And I know for the past two Lit festivals that we have had, I've tried to invite you, but I know how busy you are and therefore you could not travel to Pune. But then this time being virtual, we knew that you would accept, and I'm so happy that you accepted. And we also, looked at your convenience and decided this date. So once again, sir, I'm extremely happy that you accepted our invitation. And we hope that we continue releasing all the several books that you will continue writing, and really inspiring our students with your words, your thoughts. And Anita has already spoken about the School of Liberal Arts, and we'll never ever forget that the Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts and the Center for Liberal Arts is all because of your initiation of a conversation with Dr. Muzumdar sir of setting up a School of Liberal Arts at Symbiosis. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. I now invite the Chancellor, Professor Dr. S.P. Muzumdar, sir, to deliver his opening remarks.
Namaste, Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Namaste, sir.
Nice meeting you again online. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
On behalf of Symbiosis, I extend you a very hearty welcome. And I'm glad that you have accepted our invitation to participate in the fest. By chance, I happened to witness your launch of the book in London, in Jawaharlal Nehru Center. I also happened to see your interview with Arnab Paul and also Karan Thapar, and all these three occasions I really enjoyed. I'm really glad that this book has become extremely popular. I happen to say some of the words like namaste and quarantine. And for the first time, I realized that quarantine really consists of 40 days and not 14 days as doctors prescribe nowadays during corona pandemic. I am really amused to see the origin of each word. So also apostrophe, the importance of punctuation you have beautifully exemplified by these things belong to husband and these things belong to husbands. I am really excited. Thank you so much, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, for accepting our invitation. As Vidya rightly said, we keep on meeting each other very often. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Dr. Mazumdar. It's a pleasure to be with you and Vidya and the team of Symbiosis again today at the inauguration of your Lit Fest. It's wonderful that we are able to do this. As Vidya says, after many a near miss when I couldn't come to Pune, here we are together virtually. There seem to be some advantages to the enforced distancing required by COVID.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A book about words written by none other than Dr. Tharoor. It probably doesn't get better than that. Chancellor Dr. Muzumdar will now virtually launch this book. I request Pro-Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor and the author, Dr. Tharoor, to join him. Those with virtual backgrounds are requested to just switch it off momentarily while the book is being launched.
I declare that the book is launched at my hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Great to see you. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Lovely. Dr. Aarti Vani is head of the English department at Symbiosis College of Arts and Commerce. She's the founding co-editor and now lead editor of Studies in South Asian Film Media, published by Intellect Publishers UK. Our chief guest with whom Aarti will be in conversation now is a prolific and versatile author, politician, and former international civil servant. We have taken and continue to take great pride in the service that he rendered to the world while he was at the United Nations. Thank you so much, Dr. Tharoor.
Excuse me, what about Vidya and Vice Chancellor holding the books of Shashi Tharoor?
They did, sir. They did.
They did?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Hello and good morning again, everyone. Let me begin with thanking Symbiosis, Dr. Muzumdar, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Dr. Rajni Gupte, and my dear friend Anita for giving me this opportunity of having a conversation with the Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Dr. Tharoor, it is an honor and such a pleasure to be talking to you, even though it is virtually.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let me start with, of course, this book that we had the pleasure of launching this morning. And Dr. Muzumdar has actually already told us what this book is about and how this book is about words. There are a brief description For those who have yet to take a look at the book has 53 words, um, carefully curated and, dare I say, rather whimsically, by Dr. Tharoor. And each of the book word comes with a story. There is a story which is, in terms of origin, etymology, associations, histories, anecdotes, and it makes an absolutely delightful reading. I was also struck by its a rather quirky title, Dr. Tharoor, and also a very quaint design. I mean, it kind of seems to remind me of childhood. You know, with the little dinosaurs illustration, it could just be a book, children's book of animal stories. And as you can see, that gives a sense of fun and wonder of childhood to the book. Um, there is much more to that in that, and one can see Dr. Tharoor's a rather intense relationship with words and language. In the dedication, you say that this is a gift or an inheritance from your father. Why don't you tell us about this and about how your journey from then to the publishing of this book, and at this moment where you have sent Indians scrambling to look for the meanings of words like farrago and sonny-boster.
Okay, well, I mean, you've raised a lot of issues in that introductory question. Let me start off with my father, because he really was my teacher, guide, research advisor, imparter of values, source of faith, energy, self-belief, all of that. And my enthusiasm for life and my appetite for learning are very much inherited from him, Chandran Tharoor. And so is my workaholism, I'm afraid, which was one of his characteristics too. And my love for words, which was his absolute obsession. He was a Scrabble addict way before it became fashionable. He played every word game that had ever been invented, including Boggle and all those things. He would invent his own word games with my sisters and me. One simple one, which I'm sure is very commonly played, is coming up with a 9 or 10 letter word and asking us, the children, to derive 4 or 5 letter words or more from the Langa word, which was a very interesting exercise in seeing how letters connected with each other. But he invented a much more challenging one, which worked on family car journeys and so on, where one of the passengers had to imagine a 5-letter word and the others had to guess it within 20 attempts by trying out 5-letter words and being told how many letters matched with the secret word. So all of this kind of fascination with words had to rub off on me. And I must say that at the same time, he taught me how important words were for communication, for conveying your ideas, your values, your principles, for articulating, because very often words are what shape thought. So all of that, I think was fundamentally important to me in terms of the genesis of my, I think, still partly undeserved reputation for being a bit of a word lover. Then there is the question you asked about the quaint title and appearance of the book. I mean, the appearance is entirely the publisher's contribution, because obviously I think they wanted a book that would appeal to both young people, I mean, teenagers and children, but also to the inner child and all the adults. So the words are not children's words, they're words for adults as well. But the appeal of the book has been designed and with all of illustrations and so on in such a way that it would actually capture the imagination of young and old. As to the title, the unusual title, that also came from the publisher, Penguin. Meru Gokhale, the publisher there, said, listen, we can have a title that combines your name with Tyrannosaurus, since everyone is so terrified, and Tyrannosaurus is terrifying dinosaur, right? Tyrannosaurus Rex. So everyone is so terrified of big words, and Thesaurus, because people want to look them up. So Tyrannosaurus, Thesaurus, and Tharoor gives you Tharoorasaurus. That's the background to the title.
Thank you. So, words, of course, love words. When did it also kind of grow and mature into your pretty serious involvement with literature? I mean, one of your early books were fiction. Later on, of course, you've gone on to write non-fiction. I mean, I don't think you really formally educated in literature, but yet your understanding and knowledge seems to beat any literature major. So how is it like, I mean, how did you get involved in reading? Were you a voracious reader right from the beginning?
Yes, Dr. Vani. In fact, I was not only a voracious reader, but I had the great advantage of growing up in India without television, without Nintendo, without computers, without mobile phones. Literally, books were my only escape, my only education, my only entertainment. On top of that, I was an asthmatic child. From about the age of 2.5, when my parents moved back to India from London, I grew up suffering terribly, a childhood full of wheezing. This is the era before inhalers. One had a real challenge, and you couldn't sleep because you were sitting up in bed trying to breathe. And so the result was that I just needed to read just to stay alive. And the combination of both the ailment and the lack of alternatives made me perforce an absolutely obsessive reader. And I read extraordinarily large amounts of books. I think now the quantity has subsided considerably, but in my childhood, I was an absolutely voracious reader for these reasons. And I hardly ever needed to consult dictionaries because I never needed to have a systematic approach to learning new words, because I never believed in memorizing words for their own sake. Because I was reading so widely, when you see the same word being used in multiple contexts, you start to get an idea of its meaning through the way it's situated in the text. And that's why I always tell students and others that the best way to expand your vocabulary is not by mugging up the dictionary, it's just through reading books, and reading books that give you pleasure. Now, you mentioned that I hadn't studied literature. I have to say that it's a wrong thing to say to an English professor like you, especially a head of department. But the truth is that I loved English literature too much to want to study it. I thought that would be like studying about girls at medical school. You know, you really had to discover your love for yourself. And so I studied history, which was my favorite subject. And I read history also beyond the syllabus at high school and in college. But I did read an awful lot of literature, fiction, and somewhat later non-fiction for my own pleasure. I don't consider myself as somebody unjustifiably once called me India's unofficial English professor. There are plenty of genuinely talented English professors out there like you and your team at Symbiosis. I'm merely a humble writer and linguophile, a lover of language. But I will say, since you mentioned Farrago and all of that, that the words in this book are not particularly, how can I say, of one type. There are words that I had recently used in a tweet or a social media post or a TV interview that people expressed some curiosity about, like Farrago, kakistocracy, which is the rule by unprincipled people, something we're suffering from. Or they could be words that the country was suddenly using a lot more, as Dr. Mazumdar mentioned, quarantine or pandemic. So one goes into the origins, the explanation, the connotations, etc. Or they could be words in the news, like impeachment when Mr. Trump was impeached, or apostrophe when the British Royal Society for the Protection of the Apostrophe gave up and shut down. So that made it a news story. I thought that was fun to talk about. Or just sometimes words I could tell interesting stories about, like defenestrate, which literally means throwing out of the window and metaphorically means just getting rid of something, jettisoning something. I thought there's a whole story to be told about both the literal meaning and its current usage. So that's the kind of way in which I use the words in the book. It's perhaps arguably the least political of my books, but it's not non-political. In other words, once in a while, when a word gives me an opportunity to make a political point, I have not hesitated to do that. But that would be in less than about 10% of the words. The rest are just a discussion of words.
Yes, I discovered some gems, and my personal favorite has become Koot, which means a hug. And yeah, I mean, this is, it reminded me also of Munna Bai's Jadoo Ki Chappi. So there is
yes, In fact, it's a good point. There is a Munna Bhai parallel there. The thing about Kuch there, which is interesting, is that it is not just a hug. I mean, it's much more than if it was a hug, you could just say hug. It's a short, easy, manageable word.
Yes.
But the Welsh who came up with Kuch came up with a word that was actually meant to convey not just a hug, but something much more intimate than a hug, something that connotes snuggling, cuddling, loving, protecting, safeguarding, claiming, all at once. So it's a Kuch is something a mother will give a child, but also a husband will give a wife, a teenage lover might give his adolescent crush, shall we say, a grandparent might want to protect a small child through a Kuch. A Kuch makes you feel safe, warm, comforted. That's kind of the idea. It's an emotional embrace, not just a hug. And there is no word that conveys all of these ideas in one than this Welsh word Kuch.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I mean, the whole idea of love is kind of embodied, I think, in this word as well. You know, from there, I would like to kind of think about that when we're thinking, at least to my mind, when we are thinking about literature, writing, even the arts, science, education, for example, all of this is associated with liberalism. And but I think that we see a paradox today, that even as there is an increase in access to education, and you know, education of literature and science, and the growing opportunities for people, young people, to practice the arts or to practice the science, there are liberal arts colleges that are becoming the new norm, starting with our own liberal arts college. Even the new education policy, for example, talks about liberal education. So even when we are seeing this, you know, on the other hand, what we are seeing is, you know, an erosion of liberal values and a growing intolerance and incivility. And I don't think only in India, but I somehow feel that this is all over the world. We see it across. What do you think? What is this reason for this kind of paradoxical development and, you know, contradictions to emerge in our public sphere?
You know, it's a tough one to answer without being very political, Dr. Bani, and I know that this is not the occasion for a political comment, but I would argue there is a mounting illiberalism in our national discourse, which is a compound of many factors. One is partly from the educational sphere, the increasing emphasis on the sciences over the humanities, sciences and mathematics, I must say, over the humanities. I have given away so many prizes at so many convocations in my dozen years in Indian politics, literally dozens of convocations, and I make it a habit of asking the high school leavers and the college undergraduate graduates what their subject is, and I'm disappointed and at the same time impressed by the extraordinarily high percentage, maybe 95% of them, who are either studying science or want to work in science. That seems to be everyone's requirement. That's what parents want people to do. Now, the consequence of that is partly also that humanities education, liberal arts education disappears from most people's mindsets. And our educational system, though this may change with the new national education policy, rarely encourages a science student to take a humanities course or balance their mindsets in any way. So that's one problem. Science deals in absolute certitudes. It deals with this is either this way or that way. You can't have a either or a grayness or a nuance in science or in mathematics. The laws are immutable. But humanities teaches you about life and ways of thinking that are not immutable, that are actually about these shades of gray, about understanding things in different perspectives, that your truth may not be my truth about the same episodes. I mean, one of my novels, Riot, is the unfolding of a riot through the perspective of 14 different characters. And you see the same events, the same issues coming from totally different perspectives, and you understand how these clashes of discourse and of narrative can occur. Now, science has no room for all of that. You know, you can't say this might be this way, it might be that way. or that, maybe the light travels at this speed, but it doesn't sometimes on a Sunday morning. I don't know. So, I mean, those things are not possible. That's one major factor. The second, which may have also benefited from some of this, is that our discourse has become much more intolerant politically. That is, that we have seen the rise of political tendencies that also deal in absolutes, that have, shall we say, exclusion rather than inclusion as their theme, that privilege unity and uniformity, that talk about everyone conforming to a certain vision, worshipping a certain faith in a certain way, speaking a certain language, sharing certain cultural assumptions, thinking of history in a sort of monolithic way. All of this is the antithesis of what you would consider a liberal attitude. Now, when I said I didn't want to go very political, but let me speak simply as an individual, as a human being. I've always considered myself to be liberal-minded, which is not just in my taste for subjects or even my political philosophy. It is simply that in the way in which I relate to other human beings and the world around me, I accept the world as it is. I accept people as they are. I only seek to change that which is doing harm to others. So there's things in my society that could be better and help more people, I may want to change it. Otherwise, it just is. Similarly with people. If somebody is doing things, saying things, behaving in ways, or prolonging their own ambitions and careers in ways that I don't like, that's their problem, not mine. It is only if they're doing harm to others that I need to judge them. That's a liberal sensibility. That is not the sensibility of those who believe they have a messianic duty to promote a certain view of the world, of the past, of the present, and of the future, and who will want to thrust that view down on others who, for one reason or another, may not subscribe to their way of thinking. This is the big problem. Prejudice and bigotry thrive in an environment where absolutes and certitudes are the currency of conversation and discourse.
Yes, and I mean, one of the values of humanities is, it makes you strong enough to deal with uncertainties or to live with uncertainties, right? I mean, for like Keats very famously said, negative capability, which is the capability of living with difference and living with not knowing or living with uncertainties. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. Moving to, for example, the power of literature itself, right? Or the power of writing. Once upon a time, probably the adage, the pen is mightier than the sword, did ring true. And some of our greatest political thinkers like Gandhi and Nehru and Ambedkar were great, powerful writers too. And, part of their charisma was their writing. Do you think that also probably, I mean, I suspect that this is because, once again, the rise of mass media, that probably that writing doesn't have that much of an effect, or that's not that much of a power. Do you think that is a correct understanding, or would you disagree?
Dr. Wani, you've actually raised again a very sensitive question, because in my honest truth, when I was a kid at school, I would debate topics like the pen is mightier than the sword, and I would speak very much in favor of the motion. Today, having seen our country, its politics, its discourse, I am no longer convinced it is, because if you interpret the sword as a metaphor for power and authority, and you interpret the pen metaphorically as ideas and words, I'm sorry to say that while ideas and words may outlast power and authority in the short term can always crush the words. We have seen large numbers of people being arrested, for example, for the words they have expressed, the ideas they've expressed.
Well, that's a very depressing note to stop at. So, what would your advice be then to young people? Because many of our viewers today are students and are in their formative years where they are studying, and they have to live in this world. So, what would you say, to them? What would your message be?
Well, I certainly want them all to read widely and extensively. And here's my bias. I would like them, whatever they're studying, even if they're science students, computer programmers, mathematics whizzes, whatever they may be, to always make room for some history and some literature in their lives. I should end with a story I used to love telling university audiences. I haven't told it in a long time. It's about the engineering student who's going for a walk on his way to class or between class and the library, and he's walking past a pond on the campus, and he hears a frog-like voice saying, "Pick me up and kiss me." And the student looks all around. There's nobody around. There are no bushes or trees behind which anyone could be hiding. So he looks down, he sees it is the frog at the edge of the pond talking to, "Pick me up and kiss me." So he picks up the frog in puzzlement, and the frog says, "I'm actually a beautiful princess. Kiss me and I'll turn back into a beautiful princess." So he looks at the frog, and to the frog's surprise, puts the frog in his pocket and keeps marching. So the frog's cries, kiss me, get more and more plaintive. And this engineering student is trudging on cheerfully. Finally, as the voice gets more and more desperate and feeble, kiss me, he pulls the frog out, looks at it, and says, "Listen, I'm an engineering student. I don't have time for a girlfriend, but a talking frog is cool." And he puts a frog back in his mouth. So my message to all these nerd-like students is sometimes make time to kiss the frog also.
Thank you so much. Just before I let you go, you started your career with writing fiction, and you have been writing non-fiction largely. I guess that is because reality has become stranger than fiction to you presently. Do you see yourself writing a novel?
Yes, in fact, I'm in a bit of an amicable quarrel with my publisher right now, because my non-fiction books, Touchwood, have been doing well with the readers. There's constant demand for more. My publishers, have been anxious to get me to produce more while the going is good, while people still care about what I have to say. But I've been saying, particularly, my new book is coming out next month, The Battle of Belonging. It's a book about nationalism, the theory, the concept, the practice, and the evolution of nationalism. First globally, which is about the first 100 pages, and then the remaining sort of 300 pages is about India, our constitutional idea of nationalism, the practice of the idea of India, and then finally the strains and stresses under which that idea has been placed as a different idea of nationalism has sought to be promoted in recent years. So it's a slightly heavy book, solidly researched and rather passionately argued, but it's a book that raises, to my mind, some of the most important questions facing India today. And having written that, I told my publisher, I don't even want to think of non-fiction again for my next book. I want to go back to fiction. But he and I had discussed 2 or 3 other book ideas, and he's very keen that I do those in time, at least one of them, for the 75th anniversary of India's independence, just 2 years away. And therefore, he's not very keen on my retreating behind a novel. Anyway, I'll see, because I'm at the moment a bit worn out from this year's work and COVID and everything else, and not personal COVID, but COVID around us. And I haven't really had time to concentrate on this issue of where I need to devote my writing energies between now and the 75th anniversary. But God willing, there will be an opportunity to come up with a novel before too long, either my next book or the book after that, because I really feel that fiction reaches places in the reader that nonfiction doesn't reach. Nonfiction can only appeal to the mind, the rational person, the element of argument or discourse or quarrel or conversation, whereas, as you know, fiction touches hearts, emotions, the gut, all sorts of things, and also the part of the imagination that relates to stories rather than relates to ideas alone. So let me see. I need to think a lot more about this, and I also need to try and write a bit before I can be sure whether what I'm doing is going to last. It's been so long since I've written fiction, Dr. Vani. My last novel, Riots, was published in 2001. So it'll be over 2 decades between novels, and that's something that sobers me up. I don't want to write a book that makes people wish I should have stuck with nonfiction.
No, I'm sure if you take it up, it's something that we are going to look forward to. Thank you so much. I believe I have to let you go now. It's been such a wonderful opportunity. This has been such a great talk with you. Thank you so much for being here and for being a part of Symbiosis Literature Festival.
So
Thank
Aarti,
you.
I have a question. I have a last question for Dr. Tharoor.
All right.
Correct. Yes.
And Dr. Tharoor, I'm sure you'll take my question. So, and this I've asked you at a personal level, but I want students to know this. So, you're a very busy schedule as a politician, earlier, of course, as a diplomat, but now more importantly, as a politician and who's doing so much work in the constituency and otherwise. When do you have time to read and when do you have time to write? Because pursuing a hobby is very difficult, is what students think.
It is. It's very difficult. I have to admit my reading has plummeted because I used to do much of my reading on flights. Maybe, I would squeeze in a bit of reading at home, but most of my time, I have a 4.5-hour flight every week to Thiruvananthapuram and 4.5, 5 hours back. And therefore, I had plenty of time to read on flights. But thanks to COVID, I'm no longer a frequent traveler. In fact, I'm not a traveler at all. And as a result, that opportunity has gone down the tubes. And the other thing you asked is, when do I find time to write? Usually I have to confess at night. And I confess that without any great pleasure because I'm actually temperamentally a morning person. But I've had to change because in political life and public life, whether in the UN, whether as a minister, whether even just as a constituency member of parliament, I find that my days not only are filled with political and parliamentary demands, but that's also where my duty lies. These people have voted and put me into office. I owe them my accountability and I have a sense of responsibility to them. So it's only at about 11 o'clock at night when your constituents and your political party and your political colleagues usually stop bothering you. That's when I'm in I can sit down for a couple of hours to my writing work. The problem is increasingly the pending emails and messages and WhatsApps and work-related writing tends to eclipse the personal writing, the creative writing. So in fact, it's still the time I write, but it may not be the best time to produce the most creative work. So all I'll say to kids is, I am not sure that I am necessarily the best example for you. I can tell you somewhat ruefully that there was a review of one of my books in the Washington Post, but the reviewer said if only this chap would give up his day job, in those days I was at the United Nations, what a fine writer he would be, which I thought was a backhanded compliment because it meant that I wasn't writing as well as the author thought I could, as the reviewer thought I could. And the honest truth, frankly, is that sometimes you do need to give yourself a total immersion into one project, and I never can. I cannot spend an entire day, let alone an entire month, on just one book project. If I did that, I'm sure I could write a book, but at the same time, I probably would lose out on the responsibilities that are as important in terms of my work. So my advice to kids is follow your bliss, find out what you're good at and do that wholeheartedly. And when it comes to anything else that you want to do it only in your spare time. When you try and do two things at the same time, it can, except for a very small fraction of people, it can be both wearying and also something which could undermine each activity. That is, that you might end up, unfortunately, in a situation where you don't do justice to either one. So please, Steve, if you can find out what you really want to wake up in the morning looking forward to doing, and do that best, and let everything else just come as an avocation rather than a vocation. Juggling two vocations, as I've been doing, is not always a very easy or pleasant thing to do.
Thank you, Dr. Tharoor. Always a delight and always memorable.
Thank you all.
Vice Chancellor Rajni Gupte will deliver the concluding remarks.
Okay.
Dr. S.B. Muzumdar, the Chancellor of the University and the founder of Symbiosis. Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, the Pro-Chancellor of the University. Our esteemed guest today, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. All other dignitaries, invitees, directors, deans, staff, faculty members. It's indeed an honor to be delivering the concluding remarks. I really won't take much time, but as usual, listening to Dr. Shashi Tharoor has been an incredibly wonderful experience. You spoke about the fascinating title of the book And, I was just thinking about how it's a wonderful combination of thesaurus and your name, Tharoor. You added on the Tyrannosaurus to it, and I think that made it even more wonderful. I found the pictures fascinating, and of course, the nuggets of information that you have with each word was truly awe-inspiring, actually, because they spanned such a huge spectrum of things. They talked about history, they talked about so many wonderful things. And I think some of the words, actually, I was happy that I knew about 50% of the words. I wouldn't have thought I would have known so many of them, but I did know, but I did not know the history, or I did not know the etymology, how it came, where it came from. So it was fascinating to read this book. I think listening to you is always a delight. And today you spoke particularly about how ideas can be crushed through authority and power, something that very many of us encounter. The pen is not mightier than the sword. You also gave advice to the students to read more, to immerse themselves in a little bit of history, find time to kiss the frog. I think that's a message everyone will take home. We do look forward to your next book, Dr. Tharoor. Thank you ever so much for accepting our invitation to join us for the inaugural session of the Symbiosis Lit Fest.
Thank you. And good luck for the rest of the festival. Hope it's a big success. Thank you all very much.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you.
Dr. Mazumdar, Vidya, Dr. Gupte, and Dr. Vani, and Dr. Patankar.
Thank you, Aarti, for those delightful questions. I think your choice of questions is absolutely amazing. And it's as if you knew exactly how he would respond. Yeah. I think that's the great thing about speakers like Dr. Shashi Tharoor, that they have this huge treasure of anecdotes and great memories, and of course, great oratorial skills. I think though it was short, I think the inaugural session was wonderful, touching upon very, very important and current themes. So thank you so much.